It doesn't get much play out in the world or even in the Christian liturgical year. Transfiguration Sunday. And I know I joke that you all were probably working on your Transfiguration, Happy Transfiguration Day cards to send out to your loved ones. It seems to be that Hallmark hasn't quite figured out how to market Transfiguration in a way that would be profitable. It also seems as if it is that forgotten middle child in the church year. And I mean no offense to all the middle children gathered here today. Transfiguration. It's in between Christmas, which gets its own season, Advent, right? Where we prepare for, where we ready ourselves for the birth of Jesus into our lives once again. And then there's Transfiguration. We've been in this Epiphany season where Jesus' light continues to be revealed. And now we're on this cusp. We're on a threshold moment on Transfiguration Sunday that will lead us into the Lenten journey that starts on Ash Wednesday. And I hope you all will be here for some chocolate on Valentine's Day, 7 o'clock here in the sanctuary, where we will set our sights towards that Lenten journey and Easter. And yet Transfiguration, again, not much play, not much importance given to it. And yet, it's a story that's told in each of the Gospels, with different variations and different trajectories depending on the author's intention of what we need to pay attention to. And I wonder if it's possible that the reason why we don't hear much about Peter, James, and John and Jesus is because of their reaction to being and witnessing Jesus' transfiguration. Transfigure, the Greek word for transfiguration in the New Testament is metamorphosis. It designates a change in shape or figure. Another definition is it's a complete change of form or appearance into a more beautiful and spiritual state. To be transfigured. And as we shared with our children, anytime the Bible starts talking about a mountain, we need to pay attention. The Christian legend tells us that this mountain is Mount Tabor. The mountain is a sacred space in ancient Jewish cosmology, where heaven and earth, God and humanity meet. There's something that is significant about this mountain where the transfiguration takes place. So as we shared with our children, they go up on the mountain, Peter, James, and John, and Jesus is transfigured, dazzling white. Two heroes of the faith, Elijah and Moses, just join him because it wasn't enough to just have a bright light. We need to have two ancestors show up as well. Can you all imagine how terrifying this would be? And then there's a voice and a cloud. And a voice and a cloud are also familiar in Jewish cosmology. It harkens us back to the Hebrew Bible, the cloud that would travel with the Jewish folks as they're wandering around trying to figure out if they can really trust in this God or not. And the voice, y'all still with me? We're doing a little Bible study this morning. The voice goes back to the beginning of our journey here, the Epiphany season when Jesus is baptizing. Is what the kids said in the picture looked a little dark and terrifying. It's when Jesus was baptizing John. When Jesus was baptizing and he himself asked John to baptize him, and Jesus comes out of the water and we hear the voice that says, "This is my son, the beloved, with whom I'm well pleased." So the identity statement that we've carried with us, we've been named and claimed beloved. And yet here there's an added layer. Listen to him. Might it be possible the reason why the transfiguration, we don't hear a lot about it, is because Peter, James, and John admitted that they were terrified? And who wants to enter into a Bible story where people are terrified? They were terrified and they didn't know what to do. Of course, the natural response, they think, is that we need to do something. We need to build 3 tents because then we can contain this moment that feels so out of control. They didn't know what to do. The invitation this morning is, might it be possible in those moments where we feel ourselves terrified and we're not sure what to do, that we just allow ourselves to be in it. To be in it, which takes a bit of courage. As I have sat with and wrestled with this text for my preaching and ministerial career, And even before that, there was a piece of this text that always was a disconnect for me. It didn't make much sense. In my 20s and 30s, I longed for those mountaintop experiences, those holy moments, those encounters with the divine, those encounters in human relationships where the love was just so earth-shattering and life-altering that I just wanted to linger there as long as I could on that mountaintop. I imagine getting older, having a child, being with an amazing spouse for over 20 years has shifted my reality a bit in a fantastic way. That I'm aware that more of the daily living happens in the valleys, in the lowlands, especially we here in Minnesota. We don't have a lot of mountains, right? We live most of life in those lowlands and the valleys. The disconnect came from me in those moments. I did not feel terrified. How about you? Terrified brings with it, and I realized I carried a lens that was so limited. Terrified, being fear-filled, thinking that my reptilian brain needed to kick in and I needed to fight or I needed to flee. And yet the bodily experience of those mountaintop moments was a different kind of terror, was a different kind of fear that I invite us to try on this morning. Tara Moore, in her work Playing Big, lifts up another lens for us understanding what fear or terror might look like. She says in her wisdom, a very old new way of looking at fear, that Rabbi Alan Lev tells us that there are two different words that the Hebrew Bible uses for fear. The first is pashad, P-A-C-H-A-D. It's the fear of projected or imagined things. The fear of the phantom, the fear whose object is imagined. That pashad in the moment is usually overreactive. It's usually irrational, and it stems from worries about what could happen, about worst case scenarios we imagine. Most of us, if we're willing to be honest this morning, we know about this. It shows up that we're going to embarrass ourselves in that meeting, that we're going to be on the plane and today is the day that it will crash. It's that fear that we will say something that is rather dumb, that today will be the day that all of our coworkers and families will figure out that we're a fraud and we have no idea what we're doing. That's the fear. That's the pashad, P-A-C-H-A-D. And thousands of years before neuroscientists discovered this overactive nature of our fear instinct, it was given a word in the Hebrew Bible, P-A-C-H-A-D. We're familiar with that, yes? As are our children. And yet the invitation this morning before us is to try on the second word our Hebrew Bible uses for fear, and it's yirah, Y-I-R-A-H. Y-I-R-A-H, and it has three different meanings. Y'all still with me? It's the feeling that overcomes us when we inhabit a larger space than we are used to. It's the feeling we experience when we suddenly come into possession of considerable more energy than we had before. It's what we feel in the presence of the divine. How many times in our own lives have we experienced a glimpse of our deep truth, where we have said, this is my dream for my life. This is who I want to be. This is how I want to participate in a relationship. And you can feel the air shift, and there's a sacredness, and there's a light, and there's a love that is in that moment. And then all of a sudden, that fear voice kicks in and says, but I'm so afraid of that. I'm scared. In that moment, we're playing with both of the pashad and the yira. That terror feeling, that fear feeling that we think is supposed to constrict us, but yet we're also feeling that expansive nature. We know about fear, our reptilian brains that kept us alive for billions of years because the lion is charging towards us. That's real fear. And yet we also know the yira that comes into place where we're able to say there's also an opportunity in this moment. Yira and pashad. Peter, James, and John were experiencing both of those. This morning, our invitation in the valleys you may be in, the flatlands you may be in, or maybe you're on a glorious mountaintop experience, is to become a people as followers of Jesus who listen to this Jesus. The wisdom in this scripture, yes, something amazing that we probably cannot explain happens, and yet we also hear the light in it. We hear the roadmap, listening to our Jesus and learning, first listening, and then learning how to differentiate in the moment between the pashad and the yira. For they live differently in our bodies. Pashad usually comes with a physical sense of constriction and tightness. We know that type of fear. Many of us walk with that type of fear throughout our days. Yira comes with a spacious, fluid feeling in our bodies. Pashad usually wants a potential outcome. Yira's response wants to be right in this present moment. By listening to our Jesus, we learn how to differentiate between those two. It's not an either or, sometimes it's an and both. And learning to follow the path that it leads. We, my beloved congregation, are living in a season of transfiguration. We, my beloved congregation, are witnessing and experiencing a change of our physical shape and our form. Many amazing people are coming here and saying this is my spiritual home. This is where I want to covenant and be a part of all the amazing work that God is calling us to do. We are participating in that yira together. We, my beloved congregation, are becoming a people who are deeply connecting. As many of you have shared profound stories of shifts in your spiritual journeys and your relationship with divine presence, here and individually, collectively and individually. And we're also continuing to be a congregation, even though we get a little nervous, even though we bump up against that pashad, we're leaning into that expansive nature of taking courageous risks and our justice-seeking commitments. We're leaning into that discomfort. We're leaning into that expansive nature that our God is leading us into and out of, to be a people who listen to our God. And yes, sometimes it's rather terrifying, isn't it? When we have that conversation with our beloved family members who think and go to different churches or vote differently than we do, and we feel that constriction of pashad, but we also feel a bit of a light and an opening of the yira to build a deeper connective relationship. And then we experience that brilliance of light, the light of transfiguration that comes with a sort of energy that means we inhabit a larger space together. So let us, my amazing congregation, continue to follow and listen to our Jesus. Let us be a people who don't fear yet embrace the change of our form and our appearance, the inner terrain and our outer terrain, into that more beautiful and spiritual state as we continue following in that wisdom of our Jesus, who names and claims us beloved and walks by our side. May it begin with us. Amen.